YA verse novels are the subject of this presentation. YA verse novels can be written in any genre, but they are most commonly written as realistic fiction. Verse novels combine poetry with story. To write a true verse novel, you have to be aware both of the musicality of the poetry and how the narrative structure works. Verse novels emphasize imagery and language while telling a story with character development and the story structure of a novel. Verse novelists must write good poetry and a good story, and they have to combine both seamlessly in order for a verse novel to work. Verse novels can use any poetic form or combination of forms, be blank verse or be free verse. Specific poetic forms can be used to tell any story, but their structure can be challenging to work within. Blank verse is a poem that has a regular rhythm, iambic pentameter usually, which is the rhythm in which Shakespeare wrote his plays. Free verse poetry is free from the rules for rhythm and rhyme. Free verse provides poets with the opportunity to give their own shape to a poem as they desire to express their ideas artistically. Free verse allows poets to choose which poetic devices, rhyme, and rhythms will give them the effects they want. Most verse novel poems express a character's thinking, so they provide readers with immediate access to characters from the inside out. They can also incorporate multiple perspectives to tell a story from a variety of voices. Sometimes authors even write poems from the perspective of non-human things like the moon, a tree, or a squirrel. Action and emotion are compressed in verse novels, so they tend to move quickly from one vivid scene to another. Regardless of the type of poems authors use, remember that they have chosen to tell their story through poems, so the language choices are intentional. When capturing the action for a scene in a handful of words, every word counts, and every word is crafted to say exactly what the author wishes. There isn't a lot of setting the scene and introducing the characters over time in verse novels. Good verse novels allow readers to jump into the action and identify with what the characters are thinking and feeling immediately. Instead of long chapters, the story is sequenced into short emotional scenes. Verse novelist Kelly Bingham points out that verse novels can deal with intense suffering in a way that longer novels cannot do without exhausting the reader, because verse novels get right to the heart of the issue, allowing the reader to respond emotionally and move on. How do you know if the verse novel you're reading is a good one? Good verse novels use vivid imagery and thoughtful language choices. First of all, they are poems. They also deal with intense emotions and problems that are important to young adults. They have pacing that keeps the story moving. Like all quality YA novels, good verse novels include a relatable or engaging main character. If multiple characters' perspectives are presented, which they frequently are in verse novels, each character should have a unique voice and be fairly represented as a distinct individual. Finally, the poem should resonate with emotional truth. Elizabeth Acevedo, author of the verse novels Clap When You Land and The Poet X, has a lot to say about poetry and her choice to write novels in that format. Here are some quotes from interviews she has given about her writing. A poem is an attempt to write down a human experience in the least amount of words possible. I think that is a very simplified definition, but it gives students enough room to say, well, I've had things happen. I've had moments in my life that reverberated. That's a human experience, right? All I'm trying to do is be as efficient with language in getting that moment across. It adds enough structure that students feel like they have something to work with. There aren't necessarily rules. The container is yours to craft. I like thinking about a poem as a container that you can shape to be exactly what you want. I think she really captured the heart of free verse in that quote. Another quote she said is in the middle of the page. A verse novel is a really difficult thing to pull off well. You're trying to hold 350 pieces of poetry and see if they can link. So that points out that each poem has to stand on its own as a quality piece of writing while also linking to the other poems in the novel. Her question in the top right corner of the slide gets to the heart of the matter. What is the language doing, and is it purposeful? All authors must constantly ask themselves that question, whatever format they're writing in. Her quote in the bottom right corner is, "I spent so many agonizing hours ensuring that every line break was precise, every word and repetition chosen with care, because it was important to me to maintain the integrity of the lyric while also advancing the narrative." You can see from her thoughts that the choice to write in poetic form isn't accidental or easy, but it's very powerful when it's done well. And when it's done well, it combines poetry and story beautifully. Here are the sources for the content in this presentation. I also recommend visiting TED-Ed and watching the video, What Makes a Poem? I encourage you to explore a few verse novels. Many of them are well crafted and pack an emotional punch.